Hello and welcome to the Storied Arcs podcast. This is episode 0 of our Paper Girls talk, and I am your host, Mike.
And I'm your host, Alex.
If you notice, I said the word host because I was going to say co-host, and then I thought, if we both say we're hosts, they'll figure out the co-part.
I think so, but you are definitely now the official host of the podcast.
I'm coasting.
We can figure out what that means later.
Forward. Yeah. It's good. It's good. It's part of our podcast canon now. But anyway, we're here to talk about Paper Girls, and we're here to actually pre-talk about Paper Girls because we do a deep dive on each of the volumes, which are 5 issues at a time. This will not cover any of the plot. There are no spoilers in here, and we're not even talking about Volume 1. If that's what you're looking for, just skip right ahead to the next episode. That's not going to hurt our feelings. What we're going to talk about here is why we chose Paper Girls, what you need to know about it before picking it up, and some of the things that we like about it, and we really also want to point a spotlight on the creative team.
Yeah, we want to make sure, because as we get in talking about the book, sometimes when it comes up about the writing, the art, the color, things like that, we'll mention it at the time, but we make sure, we definitely want to make sure that we give proper credit to the team that put the work in, because Mike and I are both fans of the medium, and it's not just about the finished product. It's about understanding where it came from and who's involved and who's responsible for it. So we want to make sure we give all those people their due.
And if you ever feel overwhelmed at a comic shop or at a Barnes & Noble and you're looking at graphic novels, it's really good to remember, okay, this was a writer that I liked, a penciler that I liked, a colorist that I liked on Paper Girls, and say, oh, I really like the colorist Matt Wilson, and I see his name on the cover of this other book. Maybe I should check that out.
Absolutely.
Because it's not just like, oh, the colors will be the same as that book that I liked. It's like, no, he chose to work on Paper Girls because there was something about this story and this project that really drew him to it, and so you may have very similar taste to him. So it's just always helpful to keep things like that in mind. But anyway, we're going to start with Paper Girls because it is complete. And that's the main thing we do here. Completed story arcs. There is no tease of a continuation or a spinoff. Not to say that could never happen, because that is what comics are built on, is retconning and spinning off and doing all this other stuff. But I trust Brian K. Vaughan is finished with this. 30 issues, October 2015 to July 2019. It is collected in the form of 30 single issues, which may become difficult, if not increasingly difficult, to find as time goes on.
Especially the first handful of issues. I think
the first 5 are incredibly difficult.
Incredibly rare. Yeah,
I occasionally find them at half-price books, and they don't know what they have.
Yeah,
which is a wonderful find. But anyway, good luck finding them all in single issue. It will be much easier to find them in the 6 trade paperbacks and in true image style. The first trade in that series is $9.99. Hard to beat that. Most local libraries also have them both digitally on Hoopla and physically for rent.
And that's the version that we're going to be covering. We're going to be covering this book in those 6 trades. Well,
that's true. That's true.
Our episodes are broken down.
6 trades.
Our episodes are broken down.
But the next way to collect them is 3 deluxe editions, which are just stunningly beautiful, a little oversized, made it a little more uncomfortable to read in bed, which my wife borrowed them from me and was holding these books that are like 4 times the size of her face. But it really draws attention to the art and the coloring and all that other stuff that we love. So the deluxe editions are very beautiful collections. They each have 2 of the trades, and then there is one slightly unwieldy complete edition, but still beautiful. And frankly, I don't think 30 issues is too much to put in one edition. I've read Saga Compendium 1, which is 54 issues.
54, yeah.
In one edition. Mm-hmm. That was unwieldy, but hey, I did it. And it wasn't too bad. So
I think 30 is about the limit.
Those editions are
I think
fine.
30 is about the limit for it becoming
I believe
unwieldy.
The complete edition for this is paperback.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And that's the most recent
that's a good limit.
Most recent edition that's been printed out there. But listen, all these are out there. Get them any way you can, however is best for you to read, just as long as you read.
Yes. Okay. So first question, Alex, how did you come to this story? Did you start at the beginning? Did you miss the boat and catch up later?
Oh, no, I was here from day one. Brian K. Vaughan and Cliff Chiang, the writer and artist, the two, they're credited as co-creators, but really all four of the people we'll talk about later are really considered creators. But BKV and Cliff Chiang are two creators that whose work I knew, especially Brian K. Vaughan. By 2015, I had already read Ex Machina, Why the Last Man, had read his Runaways at Marvel. Saga had already started. I'd read Pride of Baghdad. I think We Stand on Guard maybe had already started as well, which is a little...
I believe it did.
Yeah, so he was a writer at this point that if he was putting a book out, I'm getting it. I'm there day one. I'm pre-ordering it. I'm making sure I have it.
You were also a Lost fan, were you not?
Yes, I was. Yeah, but I don't know if I knew that he had written on Lost at that point.
No, but he really wrote on it. And once you know, you can't unknow
absolutely,
it. Like,
absolutely.
The storytelling style for Lost is so Brian K. Vaughan.
It's up his alley. And also Cliff Chiang is an artist that I knew, for me, specifically from the New 52 Wonder Woman run. He started that run off and did the first 35 issues, I think, with Brian Azzarello. So it's two guys. It's a writer and artist that I like, that you tell me they're putting together. And I'm like, well, yeah, of course I'm going to read that book. So I was in from the start, knowing that there was a very high likelihood that this was a book I was going to enjoy. And boy, did I ever enjoy it.
For sure. And for me, those combos are like, anytime I see Lemire and Sorrentino, I'm like, yep, I'm in. Anytime I see Tom King and Mitch Gerards, it's like, yes, I'll buy it. Yeah. So we all have those combos. It's good to keep those in your back pocket and keep them in your pull list.
My number one for that. My number one for that, by the way, is Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips. Anything those guys...
I knew that about you.
Anything those guys put out, I will read it. I own... quite literally everything those guys have ever done professionally. They are my favorite.
I want to say that it's true about Sale and Loeb, but it just isn't.
I have a lot of Sale and Loeb.
They've got a lot of hits, but they have quite a few
They got some misses there too. Yeah. But yeah, they're, when, and this, you mentioned earlier about when you go to a shop or, a bookstore, whatever it is, and you try to find something new to read, if you pay attention to the creative teams of stuff you liked already, whether it's the same team or not, if it's the same writer, the same artist, same colorist, that can lead you down different branches to discover new books that maybe you wouldn't have normally looked at simply by following, well, I like this guy's work on this last thing I did. I like what this artist did. I like the way she used color. I like the way he did lines. I like the way she wrote dialogue, whatever it is. You can then, feel pretty comfortable. If you like their work one way, you may like it on something else. So it's a good way to keep that in mind. When you're reading comics, as a way to expand your library and expand what you read.
For sure. And by the way, my origin with it is just that I saw the cover art on issue 1, and I was like, "Dang, that's cool." It's a bright yellow book,
stunning cover,
just jumps out of a comic
stunning
wall.
Cover.
And I was like, I had recently. I was a few years into comic reading. I came in through the big two, then started to find that I preferred things from Image to anything from Marvel and DC. I was like, it's an Image book, it's $2.99, and look at that bright yellow cover. And sometimes that's all it takes. And let me tell you, I've had more hits than misses. So I think it's perfectly acceptable to, in a positive sense, judge a book by its cover. I also would never dismiss a comic book because of its cover.
Yes, very much so.
But you can find some interesting stuff by just saying, like, how they're marketing this book really appeals to me. It looks like something I might be into. Mm-hmm. And then I opened it, and it's set in Ohio, and I'm a real homer for Ohio. Even if it
is Cleveland, right? I mean,
a mistake by the lake. Yes.
Mike and I are both Cincinnati natives. But Brian K. Vaughan, another Ohioan, but Cleveland born. And really, when it comes to comic books and comic creators in the history of comics, very few places in the world can hold a candle to Cleveland, Ohio.
That's true.
The modern superhero as we know it, Superman was born in Cleveland, Ohio. It's the childhood home of Siegel and Schuster, and more recently in modern day comics, the three Bryans are all from Cleveland: Brian K. Vaughan, Brian Michael Bendis, Brian Azzarello, all Cleveland born. So
it's a power line.
There's something in the water in the lake there. Don't ask what it is because it might set on fire. But it
is flammable.
There's something up there, and so
and yet
a lot of Brian's work is set up in the Cleveland area or kind of in that in that part of the world. He puts a lot of focus on that.
Yeah, that Great Lakes area, and yet Cleveland is the home to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Riddle me that. Where is the Comic Hall of Fame? And move the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame to just anywhere else.
You know what? The best we have is, I think Jerry Siegel's house has been, it's been preserved. His childhood home has been preserved in Cleveland. You can go up there, and it is kind of a museum to him and Joe Shuster and the creation of Superman. But it's not really like a Comic Hall of Fame. But I do think you can go up to Cleveland and take a look at that and pay homage to where it all began.
Yes. So, as mentioned, Brian K. Vaughan is the writer. He is well known for many of the things we've already listed. Saga with Fiona Staples at Image. Mm-hmm. I'm not as familiar with his Marvel or DC work.
Yeah, his DC work is mainly, I would say mainly, his DC specific work is mainly Batman related. He had much more work with Vertigo, which is a DC imprint, but he had a run on Swamp Thing, then Why the Last Man with Pia Guerrera and Ex Machina with Tony Harris are two major books. Over at Marvel, he had a run on Ultimate X-Men, but is really known for creating The Runaways with Adrian Alfona. The Runaways is one of my all-time favorite books, and again, it's one of the reasons that I follow Brian K. Vaughan to any book on any publisher anywhere, because those characters and that story is just absolutely one of my favorites.
Yeah. And Brian K. Vaughan, I would say, is a very fan-centric writer. In most of his books, you get little letters and exchanges with him in the back of them. Whenever it's in his power in a creator-owned sense, he keeps the book priced at $2.99. Mm-hmm. I don't think he has that kind of weight to throw around DC or Marvel.
Well,
they're not big on the $2.99 cover prices, but Image is usually letting him do it. I mean, Saga is still going $2.99 a book.
And at this point, he has moved beyond the need for doing for hire work at DC or Marvel. I don't anticipate.
Oh yeah, he's comic royalty.
Yeah, I don't anticipate him doing anything at the big two outside of maybe if maybe you wrote him back in for like a one shot in an anthology or something like that. I don't see him ever going back to work on even like a mini series at one of the big two. Don't get me wrong, I'd love it if he said, "Hey, I'll buy it. I got a Spider-Man story or something like that, or I got my own Superman story." That'd be incredible. I'd buy that in a heartbeat. Just don't think it's going to happen. So yeah, at this point, it's all creator owned. It's all Image, and yeah, when he can control the output, like you mentioned, it's pretty fan focused, which means doesn't have 1,000 variant covers, doesn't raise the price out there. It's one book, it's one issue, it's usually one printing, so it's going to be out there, it's going to be on schedule. I think he takes a lot of pride in that, and the people he works with also take a lot of pride in that as well.
And he's also, I think, a very generous creator who likes to share the spotlight with others.
Yeah.
And seems to have no ego. Somehow, just a perfect human man.
Yeah, he definitely wants to make certain that his collaborators get the due that they deserve, because too often when discussing comics, it's considered a writer's medium, and we talk about writers only, which is ridiculous to think about, because if you look at a comic and the majority of what you see is not words.
It's a visual medium.
Yeah, it's not words. So he does go out of his way to make sure.
So in the spirit of Brian K. Vaughan, we're going to talk penciler, colorist, letterer.
Yes.
Where do you want to start?
Let's start with penciler, Cliff Chiang. As I mentioned, I came to know his work through the New 52 Wonder Woman, which he did with Brian Azzarello. Most of his interior work is done through DC. He was a former assistant editor at DC. I think the New 52 Wonder Woman and a run he had on Green Arrow, Black Canary with writer Judd Winnick are probably his most notable works prior to Paper Girls. His current work is this awesome DC Black Label book called Catwoman Lonely City, where he is writing, drawing, coloring, and lettering the entire book. It's oversized magazine format, and it's just an absolutely beautiful book. And if you were to pick that up, I think you'll notice some of the coloring choices and coloring decisions that he makes in that book are very similar to things that you see in Paper Girls and also in his Wonder Woman run with the colorist Matt Wilson, who is they use for Paper Girls here. Matt Wilson colors for books for every publisher, every character. If you have a favorite book out there, there's a good chance he's probably coloring it. I would say most notably, though, is for this kind of recap, is that he did work on that New 52 Wonder Woman. So, here you have a pencilist.
That's 2 out of 3 Bryans that he's worked with now.
But you have a colorist, a penciler, bringing on a colorist that he's already worked with before, someone they have a rapport with, someone who maybe understands the style and gets what they're trying to get across with the pencils and the inks. So, there's already probably a bit of a shorthand there. And that also extends to the letterer and the designer of the book, Jared K. Fletcher. He did lettering, and he also designed the truly awesome title, Paper Girls, that you see on the cover there. He did that design work. He's mainly worked at done lettering for DC, Vertigo, Wildstorm, which is really all DC. He's done some Marvel work as well. But here he worked specifically with BKV on Ex Machina. So there you have a writer bringing in a letterer he already knows, and an artist bringing in a colorist he already knows. So all these people are people who have collaborated before, who, when you come out to do an image book, a book that you create and own yourself, who do you want to work with? You want to work with people you're comfortable with, people you already know, people you have a relationship with. And so we see that in this team, and they come together and just do an incredible job, because I think they're familiar with each other, with their styles and what the expectation is to tell the story they're trying to tell.
And I got to say, I think the heavy lifting in this series, this is why I was going to go back to him. I don't want to spoil anything, but I think Matt Wilson does the heavy lifting. The colors are so thematically important.
It really is.
To the storytelling mechanism.
Yeah.
That I honestly will say you would be lost without it.
I would
in this book.
I would agree with that. I think as people are getting into the story, especially if they're getting it for the first time, if we want to give any sort of hints without spoiling anything, I think it would be pay attention to the colors, and just you can, and really not like taking extensive notes on them. It's really, you can just bask in how lush and how beautiful they are.
You will notice them whether you notice yourself noticing them or not.
That's true.
They'll sink in,
Yeah.
and they're just tacit cues.
Yeah.
But yeah, so this creative team, and like we said, Brian K. Vaughan, a generous guy with accreditation and everything. First issue has no names on the front cover.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm just skimming through my covers here. It looks like by the time you get to 25, you have all 4 names on the cover.
Yeah, I think so.
So it's either everyone or no one.
Yeah. And I think technically, if you read the credits, like in the fine print, I think it's they call it co-created by Brian K. Vaughan and Cliff Chiang. But I think in terms of how they set up, I think how everyone got paid in terms of royalties or whatever, I think they consider all 4 of them co-creators. Maybe not totally equal co-creators, but I think within their own group, they consider all 4 of them partners in its creation of the story, which is very, very cool. And it's not something that you often see. It is typically always just writer and main artist, whether that is a penciler who, inks their own stuff or doesn't, or colors their own stuff or doesn't. Usually the main artist and the writer are the people that are credited as the co-creators, the sole co-creators. And colorists, letters, inkers, things like that are part of the team, part of the creative team, but really aren't credited with creation of the product.
Yes. So there's our 4 creators. We also have 4 main characters.
It's amazing.
Which I don't know how much we can really say about them. We're gonna say their names.
Yeah.
Because you really don't want to give too much away. You have Aaron, Tiffany, who's most frequently just referred to as Tiff, Mackenzie, who's most frequently referred to as Mac, and KJ, who's sometimes Cage.
Cage, yeah.
Kaje, I'm assuming that's how you pronounce it. But you have these 4 characters who are all, you have the coming of age element a little bit.
A little bit. Well,
they're like 12, 13. It's not like the true like 18-year-old. But one of them's coming up on a bat mitzvah, which is certainly a coming of age passage of rights.
But it is important that they're at that transitional age. They do talk about, the story is about quote unquote teenagers and whatnot. But yeah, our 4 main paper girls aren't actually teenagers. I think they all are 12 at the time of the story. They're all in, which I think that means they've just started 7th grade, I guess, which would be middle school, right? You're 12, 13 in 7th grade.
I'm really bad at reverse engineering that, but I believe
I'm pretty sure that's right. So yeah, they're on that cusp of teenage-dom, I guess. And yeah, I don't really want to say more about the characters. But I will say this is I did give this book to someone whose reaction was, without having read it, was, why is it about 4 girls and it's written by 4 guys? And I was like, fair point. It's a fair question.
That being said, read it and tell me what you think.
Yeah, I would.
And I'm going to issue that challenge to everyone. Because here's the thing, like, I get it. It would be much better if there was female representation in the writing team or the creative team. But, I guess they worked with who they knew. And if you read this and don't think that this is positive female representation, I would be surprised. But everyone is free to make up their own mind on that and read with whatever criteria you choose. But I would implore you in episode 0 here, read the first volume.
Yeah.
Tell me you don't like these characters after you read them.
No.
So I guess that's my only plea, is give it a chance. And, if you don't like this, then try Saga from Brian K. Vaughan, which is a male-female partnership and a family story, but much more explicit and graphic than this book.
Yeah. Although I still wouldn't call this book exactly for children, even though
it's not family-friendly.
Even though it is a coming-of-age story. Yeah.
So anyway, just a little bit about the book, as much as we can tell you without spoiling anything, and frankly, it almost feels like spoilers to discuss the setting. But we're going to start where the book starts, which is 1988. So you get a lot of that nostalgia, and we're going to call attention to it, but I don't think we want to make a meal out of it.
No.
Because they don't really either. They do a tip of the hat. It's a fun homage, but it's not just like trying to sell 80s merch and glorifying it for its own sake. In fact, a lot of the things and the technology from the 80s become key plot elements rather than just throwaway props and gimmicks in the background. So, if you take your time and study the panels, you'll see some fun things in the background, but you'll know what to make a big deal of and what not to. It's also set the day after Halloween, the morning after, in Stony Stream, which is a fictitious suburb of Cleveland. Can't say I would recommend it based on this book, but you can make up your own mind. And it follows our 4 girls who have a paper route for the fictitious Cleveland Preserver. Hence, we get the name Paper Girls, which, I don't know if you played Nintendo growing up and you played Paperboy.
Oh, yeah. Play Paperboy.
One of my favorite games. But it was always a gendered language for that job.
Yes.
And these girls are all discussing how one of them was the first to break the glass ceiling on the Paperboy job, and now all 4 of them are doing it together. And they are our Paper Girls.
Yeah, no, I think that that sets it up about as well as we can without getting into kind of story-specific spoilers. Which, if you want that, move on to episode 1 and on Trade Collection 1.
Absolutely. Now, what we just made it sound like, though, was like a small slice of life story about girls on a paper route. What genre would you use to classify this?
Ooh, well, definitely coming of age. That's a part of it. There is maybe it's spoiler to say, I don't know. I don't think it's spoiler. There is a science fiction fantasy element to the story. You know,
Yes.
there are.
I would say like an H.G. Wellsian.
Yeah.
Character.
There are things that are of our world and also not of our world. Things that exist only in kind of, you know, in that science fiction space. But yeah, it's all those things kind of wrapped up, because it is a coming of age story about these four girls, but there are also put in some very mundane earthly situations and some very fantastical circumstances as well. I think it covers a broad range, and I think maybe the moment you think you know what kind of story you're reading, especially early on, like the moment you think you know what's going on, it very quickly turns on an axis and gives you something a little bit different, and it keeps you guessing through the end. And by the time I think you reach the end and you see the totality of the story that was told, you feel you have been on one incredible ride. I think it's safe to say that. Would you agree?
Yes, and I think the best promise of this is that you'll be interested all along. By the time you get to Volume 4, especially the end of Volume 4, you will be absolutely hooked. You may even just read straight through without listening to the rest of the podcast and be like, I'll catch up on the podcast later. I got to finish this story. It becomes that compelling.
Yeah.
And I believe we will say this in the last issue or the last episode on this, but it sticks the landing so well. It's the most satisfying conclusion. It's not fan servicey,
no,
and cheesy, but it earns it and it sticks the landing so well that it's top 5.
I don't think that's a spoiler to say that if you're reading early on and you're a little uncertain about maybe some of the elements of the story, I think we can wholeheartedly endorse that by the time you get to the end, it is a satisfying when you get to the end and you close that last page and you close whatever version of this book you're reading, you will feel completely satisfied that you went on a full wondrous journey, and I don't think you'll feel cheated or shortchanged in any way whatsoever.
And if you're a rereader, you will likely be inclined to pick it up and start rereading again immediately.
I think so. If you've read this once, it's the kind of book that I think people who have read it before have maybe already read it multiple times. It's that kind of book where it lends itself to rereads because it is such a satisfying story.
100%. With that said, if we keep talking, we're just going to start recapping it again.
Yeah, let's not do that.
So we don't want to do that. So I hope you've got a copy in your hands that you are ready to read. And please join us for Episode 1 after you've completed Volume 1. And just one last reminder is that we will have a mailbag episode months down the road. So collect all of your thoughts and complaints both on the book and on our coverage of it. Send it on our website. Put it on Facebook. We will cover that and respond to it in one final episode. For now, just focus on reading and enjoying Paper Girls.
Peace.